Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice of radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio, on what is, as usual, a very special episode of PTCG Radio. We have got an interview with the new world champion Jacob Van Wagner himself, which is quite frankly awesome. Now, I have had I've seen a couple of interviews with him online, and I've enjoyed reading them greatly. The ones I've seen have been written and fairly short, and I've had to read them, and actually one I didn't see because it was on a paid part of a website. This is nothing like that, ladies and gentlemen. You can just sit back, listen, and enjoy. Now, I'm posting this podcast places where I don't usually put it, so I'm going to run the interview straight away, and I will see you on the other end. So if you're not interested in regular PTCG radio, I don't hold it against you. I hate you on a personal level, but I don't really hold it against you like that, and I'm aware that makes no sense. And if you want real PTCG radio, as normal, we'll be back the other side of this interview. Enjoy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and carrying on with what will hopefully be quite a fun little tradition, we have for the second year in a row, the world champion, fresh off of his Worlds win. He's come to have a word with us. Hello, Jacob.
Hey, how's it going?
First of all, congratulations on your Worlds win. That must be fairly nice.
Yeah, it is. I'm really excited.
So let's dive right back to the beginning then. Give us a little bit of history on yourself. How long have you been playing for? Are you a fairly new player, or has this been a long time coming?
I've been playing for about 6 years, and this was actually the first time I'd earned an invitation to the World Championships.
That's a good first run.
Yeah, seriously.
So the first 6 years, were we talking moderate success, not much success, occasional success?
I didn't really see a lot of big tournament success until around 2012. I had my first big tournament win was a state championships, and then I got second the next weekend. And then from there I started just being able to. That's when I started testing with people online and things like that, and expanding my testing group. And I think that's what helped me grow as a player.
Excellent. So in the 6 years you've been playing, do we have a favourite format, a favourite deck, something that's kind of stood out?
Favorite deck, favorite format. I really enjoy, I'm sure you have heard this from plenty of people, but I really enjoyed SP format.
That's a very common answer.
The more fun decks I played like a Garchomp C toolbox kind of deck with that stage 1 Honchkrow. That was really fun.
Yeah, I played...
that format in its entirety was very fun.
Yeah, that's pretty much the answer everybody gives me. As a Don fan player back then, I saw a lot of that Honchkrow.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Common counter. So, before we get into the deck you played, now day one, going in, everybody thought it was going to be about somewhere in like a 1 in 6 chance. Now, I might have my figures wrong here, but there were definitely 382 people in day one, and by my count, 37 people made it in, which was a ludicrously low number.
Oh, wow.
Now, knowing that you had...
Was that low?
Yeah. Now, you had to go 5-2 to get in. Did that play a part in the decision that you made in terms of your deck?
No, not particularly. Really the reason that I chose my deck was my friend Travis Nunlist was like, dude, we gotta play the same 60. This is what I'm playing. And I was like, alright, man, I'm down.
As a side note, how did Travis do if he played the same 60?
He had a couple of bad matchups from what I understand, and lost to a mirror match actually once. So he didn't make day 2.
Oh, he's got to be a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? It's got to be a bit of regret there from him. So
maybe.
By now,
I think he was okay with his deck choice.
Yeah. So by now, everybody probably knows that you played the Archie's Blastoise deck. Now, on the podcast the week before Worlds, we went through our top 6 decks, and I pulled a whole bunch of Worlds qualifiers, and only one of them even mentioned Blastoise Caldeo with Archie's as a potential deck. It wasn't really seen as a big contender for Worlds. So, what made you decide that was the...
Out of curiosity.
Pardon?
Who was it that mentioned it, out of curiosity?
An Italian chap, Andrea Ciolin.
Oh, okay.
He said that the format was ripe for kind of Caldeo because nobody was expecting it and had good matchups.
Right.
Why did you end up playing it?
same sort of reason. I was expecting a lot of Night March and things like Groudon, and maybe even some Vrisian Genesect, and not a whole lot of Seismitoad. And so I figured, if there's not going to be a whole lot of things like Seismitoad, Garbodor, then this is a pretty good play, pretty solid play.
So was that Sorry, carry on.
No, you're good.
So was that the kind of the deck you didn't want to face? What matchups were you really dreading seeing on the day?
Seismitoad Garbodor was the big one that I was dreading, just because if they get the Quaking Punch before I can combo off, then I'm in pretty tough shape, especially since they can also set up the Garbodor to prevent things like Rush-In and all of that. I think that was really the main one, was that. Everything else, I didn't feel like I had that too hard of a time versus an extra Garbodor, but I only ended up playing it one time, and the game wasn't very legitimate. I ended up benching a Trubbish twice for that series. Yeah. That was kind of my reaction, too.
Good for you, but you always feel a little bit guilty when you do that to someone.
Oh, yeah, he just had, the worst look on his face, and just, pass, and I felt bad.
Oh,
but you know what I mean? That's just what happens sometimes.
You do have to get a little bit lucky in these big tournaments.
Yeah.
So my big knock, and a lot of people's big knock on the Blastoise deck was, but you've got to use Archies, and you can only use it when it's the only card in your hand, and you've got to have a Blastoise in the discard pile, and you've got to get all your energy. And now I think you're only on stream in the final. Your deck looked, and I've seen your list, you posted it online, it looks fantastic. Is it really that consistent? Does it set up, a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were, over the weekend, probably 6 or 7 games maybe, where I didn't get a turn 1. Probably a little higher than that, but less, not very much more, where I didn't have the turn 1 Archies. Now, that doesn't necessarily, my finals games were insane. I'm not going to take away from that. I drew very, very well. I'm not going to at all take away from that. Now, all the things where I did get a turn 1, I didn't necessarily get, 4 energy and doing all this other stuff and shamaning to drop more cards on top of that. It was, I got an Archies and maybe 1 or 2 energy and a VS Seeker for a supporter next turn.
Yeah, that's still quite a nice turn 1.
Right, it's enough. It's enough.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You'd only played, I think, 2 Archies and 2 Blastoise. Was that just because, the way you ran the deck, you could essentially always find it unless it was prized?
Yeah, right, and that was the main thing, was if I prize one, then I have access to the other. I did have one game where I had the turn 1 Archies, but both Blastoise were prized, and I died a little inside. It was the easiest Archies I'd ever seen, too, and then they were both prized, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to lose. And I did. I lost that series very badly. Oh,
wow. So, going into day 2 then, you made it through. What was your day 1 record, incidentally?
5-2.
5-2, so you made it in.
I got up to 4-2 and then won a mirror match to get in.
Oh, that is by the skin of your teeth. That's quite well done.
Yeah.
So then into day 2. Now, day 2 was even more brutal than day 1. I looked, I think something like there were 6 people who got 16 points, which was 5-1-1, and only 2 of those people out of the 6 actually made it into top 8. Yeah. So you're really talking kind of 6-1 or 5-0-2 in order to cut.
Yeah.
Did you find day 2 much different to day 1, or was it kind of just carrying on, if you will?
It felt like it was just carrying on, honestly. I mean, some people maybe switched decks, but I think for the most part I saw people playing the same thing that they were playing with maybe 1 or 2 different cards.
And do you feel like it gave you an advantage having all, because you already won a heck of a lot of Pokemon on the Friday, do you think you were kind of, for want of a better phrase, in the swing of it on the Saturday?
Yeah, I felt a lot more comfortable going into day 2, because that was my goal after getting an invite, was just to make day 2. And after that, I was pretty relaxed up until the point where I was thinking, oh man, I could actually cut this. then I was around 4-1, and then the stress started coming back. But up until then, it was, so like you said, just getting back in the swing of it.
And how did you finish on the day 2? What was your record?
5-1-1.
Oh wow, so you were one of the 2 5-1-1 that made it in.
I came in at 6th or 7th.
Oh wow, that's really quite impressive. So, I mean, over the weekend, you had to play 17 rounds of Pokemon all in, and obviously the absolute minimum number of games there is 34. Did you find that kind of took its toll on the end, or...? I mean, did it ever feel like there was just a bit too much Pokemon going on?
I mean, yeah, I was definitely very tired by the end of the day. Day one wasn't so bad because you played until you got the 5 wins or 15 points or whatever, and then you're done. They kick you out of the tournament.
I was wondering about that. They literally kick you out.
Yeah, if you went 5-0, you didn't play the last 2 rounds. They didn't let you try and go 7-0 and knock more people out. They just were like, no, you're done. See you later. Have fun tomorrow.
I was wondering about that. Thanks for that.
I think it was a good thing to do. I think that was...
yeah, I think that's the right thing to do. You don't want to be sitting there on, 4-2, needing 1 win to get in, and play a dude who's 6-0 and just playing for kicks.
Right, exactly.
Now, I'm not going to ask you how it felt to win Worlds. I'm assuming it felt pretty good. What I am going to ask is, what was your Facebook like the next day?
Oh, man. My phone died a lot faster than it ever had before over the next few days. I was just like narcissistically like going on Facebook and like updating it and like swiping down to look at updates and whatever. It was all just the same. It was really stupid of me to even like do that. I should have just cleared them all out immediately. Because it's all just like, oh, so and so like the thing that you're tagged in or whatever. It was brutal. Every
time I post a new video on YouTube, it's every 10 minutes. I'm like, how many more people have watched it?
Yeah.
No, I'm with you on that one.
How many likes have I gotten? I need more likes. Come on.
So you're in next season now. You've got the paid invite for next year, which has got to feel... I mean, I always figured top 8 would probably be the worst round at Worlds, because you're playing for kind of an easy season and a paid invite the next year.
Yeah, exactly. You're a best of 3 away from a full ride next year.
So... in terms of next season, obviously you've already got your paid invite sewn up. You're going to San Francisco. Pokemon are paying your way. What are your expectations? Are you going to pay loads? Are you going to try and do loads? Or is it going to be more of a take it easy kind of thing?
Yeah, I want to shoot for day 2. I want to try and get the day 2 invite. So that's my goal now, is to also get the trip to Nationals. Because, it's, That's my goal now, is to try and get I think it's 350 points or something more I'll need for the cutoff for day 2 of Worlds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's not huge, not going to take...
It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's definitely going to be a journey to that.
So a bunch of tournaments, but I suppose if you're carrying the Worlds from the points from winning Worlds, that's going to make it somewhat of an easier thing.
Right, exactly.
I'm going to try. I mean, Jay Horning a couple of years ago, he did a similar thing. I think he got top 4 and then just went insane the next year and ended up with a ludicrous amount of championship points.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I suppose we'll finish off with one last question, and don't give anything away you don't want to, but what's going to be good next season? What decks are we going to... what should I play?
Honestly, I haven't done a whole lot of testing with it, but the things that stick out to me are probably the things everyone has heard of, like metal variants, Vespiquen, and expanded. The Donphan with the stage 1 seems really solid. That's probably what I'll go for the first week at least.
I'm so excited for that deck.
Yeah, it looks so cool. That's just like, man, I get to play Donphan and then also hit things for fire weakness or for water weakness or whatever. It just seems really strong.
Excellent.
The decks the next format seem really fun. That's what the main thing is for it. Like, they can be good and then also very, very fun to play.
Yeah, I'm super excited for Expanded, unless Shiftry is as good as everyone says, and I'm really not.
I'll probably see if I can fit just 4 Wobbuffet into whatever, and just be like, see you later, pal, have fun.
Yeah, sit there behind a turn 1 Wobbuffet and just laugh in your face.
Yeah, exactly.
And the very last question before I let you go, I didn't know you personally before this, so I hit up a few of your friends. I think Mia Violet, Dan Norton and Kenny Wisdom, I think all offered to shoot you messages. Sorry about that. Had you heard of the podcast before that?
Have I done a podcast before?
Had you heard of this one?
Oh, no.
Oh.
No, I hadn't. I'm sorry.
I thank you for your honest answer, but you have just broken my heart. Well, congratulations for...
I haven't heard of a lot of different things out there, so...
I'll take it easy. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and congratulations on your fantastic win.
Hey, I'm happy to come on. Thank you so much.
Now, somewhat annoyingly, I actually recorded that last Thursday, but of course the podcast comes out on a Wednesday, so it's been sitting there for almost a week just waiting to come out. As always, a huge thank you to Jacob for allowing us to do that interview. It was very interesting for me, and I really get a kick out of the fact that although I didn't have a chance to go to Worlds this year, my podcast has gotten to the point where lovely people like Jacob will take some time over Skype to have a chat with us, and I can actually have a talk to the new world champion about all kinds of interesting topics just by virtue of doing a silly podcast every week. That makes me very happy. And as always, huge thank you to anyone that ever helps me out with this podcast. I am ever eternally grateful. Huge thank you to Jacob, who actually came off a night shift and came on Skype to talk to us with a wonderful 8-hour time delay. And to Dan Norton, Mia Violet, and Kenny Wisdom, all of whom shot messages to Jacob asking if I could get in touch with him, because I figured straight after winning Worlds, as you heard him talk about his Facebook there, I didn't want to just send random Facebook solicitations to him. So, thank you to all of those people. Hopefully we can keep this tradition going. We had Andrew Estrada on the podcast last year. We had Jacob Van Wagner on the podcast this year. Hopefully whoever wins Worlds next year will both speak English and be able to come on the podcast, be willing to come on the podcast. And maybe if they don't speak very good English, we can have an interpreter. It's certainly something I would like to keep rolling on. And I should also say thank you to Poker Press, who was one of the people who sent us. They did an interview with Jacob Van Wagner. I'm sure if you just Google Poker Press, POKEPRESS, you'll find it very, very quickly. I very much enjoyed reading that one as well. So, what's been going on in the world of Pokemon this week? Now, I've had some questions from people about Expanded. Now, we've got a piece of news in a minute, which goes straight to the heart of Expanded, and we've got some new cards that we are going to take a gander at. But let's just stop for a second and talk about Expanded. Now, last year on the podcast, I rarely got into Expanded. What I essentially said was, look, I'm talking about Standard, and if I ever start talking about Expanded, I'm going to make it very clear. Otherwise, it's Standard all the way. We can't really do that this year. Now, we had an announcement this past week that the UK is going to have 12 regionals split into 2 sessions. One session is running the end of this year, one is running around, I think, March, April time. I forget the exact dates. The first session is going to be made up of exclusively, and there's going to be 12 of these, one in Ireland and 11 in kind of mainland Britain, if you will. And the first 6 of these, the first session, I believe there's 6 in each, is going to be exclusively Standard. So all of the regionals in the first session are going to be Standard, and all of the regionals in the second session are going to be Expanded. This led to a whole bunch of, oh, well, hang on a second, we don't want Expanded, I'm not going to go to Expanded regionals. Yes, you are. You might prefer Standard to Expanded, but we all know that if you're going to Pokemon, you like Pokemon, and you're going to get championship points, and the Expanded regionals are going to be just as busy and just as competitive and just as well tested as the Standard. It's going to be very interesting this year, because last year, and we talked about it on the podcast a lot, even these, and there was a bunch of regionals in the US which were Standard up until Day 2, top 32 and above, which then went into Expanded, and an awful lot of people played the same deck with 1 or 2 cards changed. I think people are going to play very different decks depending on Standard or Expanded this year, especially the good players who take the time to really test what's good. Could be wrong, but there we go. What I'm going to do, and I'm going to start it next week, assuming nothing else comes up, which of course is a rather large assumption. And now I was asked if I was going to do it as a series of videos on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/PTCGRadio. The answer is initially no. I'm hoping I will get to do some videos, but I'm not going to have time to do them comprehensively as videos for the time being. What I am going to have time to do is go through it on the podcast, and over the next few months I'm going to be going in great detail all the way through everything you need to know about Expanded. I'm going to be looking all at what kind of supporters there are, how to go about building decks in Expanded and the best way to go about doing so, and all of the deck combinations. It's all going to be coming up, ladies and gentlemen. It's all coming along. As I've said, if you can think of any decks which are coming up and expanded which are completely devoid from standard, please let me know. We're going to be talking about things like Durant, like Klinklang, like Vileplume, Excelgor, a deck I've put a bit of time into testing. But expanded, we're not really going to start today, other than to, give you a few of those decks. But over the next few weeks, couple of months, I'm going to be telling you all about the new decks to expect in expanded, which will not be showing in standard. We'll be doing all the standard stuff as usual. And I'll be talking about supporters and Pokemon tools and deck building tips, etc. It's going to be fun. So, let's just start off with the big news. The big news this week is Shiftry has been banned in expanded. Which, let's face it, a lot of people saw coming. But this, to me, was I think it was a really watershed moment in the Pokemon trading card game as it stands. Because we had Lissandra's trump card banned, and that really was quite an exceptional ban. It really was a big deal. It was the first ban that had come about in many, many a year, certainly since Pokemon themselves had been running it rather than Wizards of the Coast. But more importantly, it showed a willingness of, hang on a second, this card sucks, this card breaks the format, and not in a fun, I've made a deck that beats you all, mwahaha, bow to my ingenuity kind of way, but in a, I've made the game not fun kind of way. And Pokemon came out and just said, right, this card isn't fun. This card is ruining it. The only decks which are really viable are these stupid Seismitoad decks. So, let's get rid of it. We're not having this anymore. Makes perfect sense. But the real question after that, and this is the question I posed myself, I did a YouTube video about it and I talked about it on this podcast, and the question really was, are Pokemon now going to keep doing bans? Or was that really a one-off in exceptional circumstances? Now, I'll get on to why Shiftry's been banned and what that's going to do to expanded. Obviously, it wasn't legal in standard anyway, in a moment. But I think more importantly, maybe the biggest news that comes out of this isn't that Shiftry itself is banned, but the biggest news is Pokemon are willing to ban. And very much like Lissandra's trump card, they put it up on Pokemon.com and they gave a brief overview of why it's banned. Essentially, it allows people to win on the first turn of the game through nefarious circumstances while your opponent just kind of sits there crossing their fingers hoping you don't hit everything you want to hit. It's boring. So, it makes sense. But Pokemon seem to have made it clear, and they did say this kind of explicitly, they are watching the tournaments. Now, Shiftry didn't actually come out into any tournament. So, Pokemon aren't just watching tournaments. Pokemon are watching. They are on social media. They're watching our Facebook groups. They're watching the Twitters of some people. I'd like to think they're watching mine, but I'm neither popular, famous, or, they don't care. I'm going to be honest about it. They don't care about me. But I'm assuming they are watching the Twitters of other people. And they are watching to see, essentially, what cards are going to be harmful. So when they saw Shiftry and they saw all the buzz that Shiftry was getting, I think they had a look at this and they thought, well, okay, this doesn't necessarily, let's have a look at it. And then they did a bit of research and they probably ran some tests themselves and realised, you know what, this Shiftry, it's not good, let's ban it. And they banned it before. Now, what they could have done, we've got some US regionals coming in October the 9th. So, what they could have done was wait for those first tournaments and then seen if Shiftry really did have the impact it could have done. Now, I like that they banned it early, because if they'd have decided after the first week of regionals, okay, boys, this isn't working, that means people have got to do an about turn very quickly. Whereas now we've got or people in the US have got over a month of testing for these regionals, which I think makes quite a huge amount of sense. They've given them enough time to do that, and I appreciate that, and I hope all the US people do. Pokemon are watching and they're paying attention and they're trying to create a better environment. Now, you can argue for or against the ban of Shiftry as you like. That's not really important to me in this part of the discussion. What is important in this part of the discussion is Pokemon are watching and they are making a real concerted effort to make our game more fun and less stupid. They are not going to micromanage and fix every tiny little thing that we don't like about the game or that you personally don't like about the game. I'm sure they apologise for this. But what they are going to do is for things like Lissandra's trump card, things like Shiftry, they are going to go, you know what, this sucks, let's not do this. So why was Shiftry so good? Now, we did talk about this a few weeks ago, and we talked about Giant Plant Forest, or Forest of Giant Plants, or Broken Vine Space, or whatever you want to call it. But I'll give you a very quick recap now for those that have forgotten or didn't listen to that particular show. Essentially, Shiftry, it's from Next Destinies, I believe. And this Shiftry, it was a dark Pokemon, and it never saw any play. And I was doing the podcast back when Next Destinies came out, and it actually would be interesting. Maybe for next week, I'll see if I can grab the audio clip of what I said about Shiftry at the time. It's going to take way too long for me to find it, cut it, and put it in today. I want to get this online. Speaking of getting it online, I know it's been about a week since I did a new video on my YouTube channel. I'll be doing a deck breakdown of Jacob's World's Winning List, which will hopefully be online today, if not tomorrow. So look out for that. It's going to be online today, which is Wednesday the 2nd, or tomorrow, which is Thursday the 3rd. And I should be getting videos up a little more often. I'm going to a league challenge in Norwich on Friday, and I've gotten permission from the store. They are going to let me film some games there on Friday, so hopefully I will have some new. I've got a couple of old league challenges from, I think, just before Roaring Skies, which are going online at some point. But as this is the first weekend where Ancient Origins is released, I think it's a good time to go and record a league challenge with Ancient Origins. When I say released, I mean legal for tournament play. So you can get a kind of a sneak peek at what Ancient Origins is going to do. And there are a couple of Worlds competitors, including my very good friend Nick Pierce, who's going along. So we should get some really good games recorded there. Anyway, back to Shiftry. When I said at the time, I basically said it's got an interesting ability, but it's a pain in the neck. It's a stage 2, it's got a terrible attack, it ain't going to work. Now, the ability is called Giant Fan, and essentially you flip a coin when you evolve into Shiftry, and if you get a heads, you get to make your opponent shuffle one of their Pokemon into their deck. A mild inconvenience, a huge inconvenience, against something like a Groudon deck, for instance, where you can make them shuffle the Groudon all the energy, but really not that great. The problem was Forest of Giant Plants, Broken Vine Space, as I like to call it. Because, as I've said on the podcast before, it's not what you're evolving into, it's what you're evolving from. Because Shiftry evolves from Nuzleaf, and there is a grass Nuzleaf, you can go C.Nuzleaf Shiftry with Forest of Giant Plants in play, straight away, on turn 1, and win. Or at least get the flip. But of course, you can play a 4-4-4 line, and you can make decks nowadays with things like Trainer's Mail and Acrobike, etc. You can make a deck that runs through your entire deck in a turn. It is possible. I've seen some people testing this, and people have actually, they've actually done some really good articles where they've gone through the numbers. But that's not it. You can run as. Now, you can only play one supporter per turn, but that's one AZ you can use. And you've got 4 Super Scoop-Ups. So that is a potential of up to 9 Shiftry flips. And, of course, we're in Expanded, so you've got Dowsing Machine for another Super Scoop-Up. Or you've got Scoop-Up Cyclone, which is, of course, a better option. You can see where I'm going with this. You can do it again and again and again. And you can win on turn 1. And if you go first, this isn't an attack, it's an ability. So you can go first and do this. And people were demonstrating online how this could work. And you could essentially just win the flip and win. It was more difficult, but even if your opponent got 6 Pokemon out turn 1, you could then go second and on your first turn, clear their entire field. So Pokemon have decided to ban it. And I like this because, I was planning decks and thinking, I should put one Baltoy in there because it's a basic with Fate to Stop, which means Shiftry can't get rid of it. Or, I should, ruin my consistency by putting in 4... Wobbuffet, because that turns off Shiftry's ability. If I start with it, then my opponent isn't going to be able to do that. And then I thought, well, no, I don't want to put in those counters. I don't want to ruin the consistency of my deck. I'm just going to hope not to meet any Shiftry and hope they flip badly or draw badly if I do. That's not what we want to do. Obviously, we often sit there going, I really hope my opponent doesn't draw cards X, Y, and Z, or else I'm screwed. But what we don't do is sit there going, I really hope my opponent doesn't draw everything they need so that I don't have a turn. Now, one interesting, for my money, by far the best alternate solution to this was doing an errata so Broken Vine Space only worked to evolve a grass into a grass. Or, it's evolving into a grass rather than from a grass. Now, this would also have fixed Fortress. Now, Fortress, however you want to pronounce it, it essentially allows you to do 10 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon when you evolve. And again, you can do this many, many, many times a turn. You can do it 10 times a turn. And, knock out a whole bunch of Pokemon on turn 1. Although I don't think that's anywhere near as good, and I don't think it's going to be a huge problem. Pokemon seem to be basically saying we would rather ban than errata, which is interesting because remember that when Pokemon Capture was too gosh darn good, it got errata to include a coin flip. Although maybe that was because it was a trainer that they wanted to reprint, so it made sense to reprint it with an errata, rather than doing the whole Shiftry thing of let's just ban the card. But Pokemon seem to have set out their stall, they're going to ban cards. And my inkling is if Fortress turns out to be too good, they're going to ban Fortress as well, and why the heck not, quite frankly? It makes perfect sense. I really like the ban of Shiftry, but that's the ban, the reasons why it happened, what it means going forward, and why they're probably not going to errata cards in the near future. Although I think when it comes to trainer cards, they probably still will errata it, but only so that they can just release versions with the errata, rather than having to ban a trainer and never use it again. With Pokemon, they tend to be kind of one-shots. Here's your Pokemon. Obviously, the outrage Pokemon didn't fit that, but with them generally being one-shots is much easier to ban. And yes, I'm aware that the Lysandre's Trump card got banned, not reprinted, but that was because it was a particularly horrific, venomous card. So, with all that in mind, let's have a look at some new cards before we get out of here today. And there are a whole bunch of them, so let's get rolling. There is a Mismagius. It's a stage 1. It's a Psychic. The attack is garbage. Psychic and a double colourless for 60 damage and confusion. Don't even go there. Now, I've been talking on the podcast recently, especially with the reveal of Gallade, which I think we went through on the podcast last week, week 159. There is, we got the Natu, which takes an extra prize. We got the Deoxys. There is a chance here for a really good Psychic deck. Now, the attack ain't going to get Mismagius a space in that deck. It's got an interesting ability. Once during your turn, when you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may use this ability. Your opponent shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck and draws cards equal to the number of his or her remaining prizes. What that basically means is you are ending them, but with an ability, which is kind of interesting. Now, one of the things I started testing, I went to League this week, and one of the things which I loved about playing my games this week, and it did not go well, I was playing silly decks, and it did not go well. But one of the things I loved about this new format is essentially, if I open up a really good hand, I'm not getting end out of it. I can plan 2 or 3 turns ahead, knowing I'm not going to get end. So I was doing things like, right, okay, well I've got a Pokemon fan club in hand, and I've got a Juniper in hand, and I've got 2 energy in hand. Well, I can play the fan club this turn and get a couple of Pokemon and attach an energy to one of them, and then next turn I can attach the other energy in Juniper. And I know that's very simple, it's just an example, but it essentially allows me to plan my turns ahead without being disrupted by N. Now, on the flip side, N being gone from the format means that you can't have these epic comebacks. I always found with N, I got N down to 1 by good players far more often than by new or by poorer players. I don't think that was a coincidence. Now, it's a stage 1. You can play it as a 1-1 line. You're using it for the abilities. You can put it into any one deck. I would not be surprised to see a 1-1 tech of this going into decks. You essentially just end your opponent. But if they get down to 1 prize, you play Mismagius and boom, they're end to 1. Or they've got 1 card in their hand. Actually, this will combo quite nicely with Vileplume. Trainer lock them, wait till they've got a few prizes left, and then boom, drop the hammer. Gengar. We knew there was going to be a Gengar because we'd seen a Haunter, and I told you Gengars were likely to be interesting, and Gengar is interesting. For 1 Psychic Energy, 1 damage counter, so it gets through things like Mr. Mime and Expanded. 1 damage counter onto each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, and poison to your opponent's active. Very meh, but remember it's for 1 energy. Now, this is a stage 2 and it's a Psychic, so we're talking Wally and Manual Evolution, or we're talking Rare Candy. Either way, we're talking stage 2 here. But it's the other ability I like. Psychic and a colourless Creepshow. Now remember, Dimension Valley lowers the ability cost by 1. So that means that this can be done for just 1 Psychic energy. If your opponent's active Pokemon has at least 3 damage counters on it, that Pokemon is knocked out. Instant KO for 1 energy. Now remember, we've got Fresh Water set, which will heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. Remember, we've got the World's Promo for the last 3 years Champions Festival, which heals 10 damage from each of your Pokemon a turn, as long as you've got a full bench. And remember that for Water and Lightning Pokemon, we've got Rough Sea. So healing will kill this. But you can play something like this with Bats, or Faded Town, or Magma's Hideout. Essentially any of the things we talked about when we were talking about Tyranitar in my recent video on my YouTube channel. I know I reference my YouTube channel quite a lot. I'm sorry if that annoys anyone, but essentially the way I figure it, you're listening to this podcast if you're interested in the Pokemon trading card game. I use my YouTube channel and the podcast will always come first. If I ever quit, I will quit the YouTube channel long before I quit the podcast. Let's just be clear about that. The podcast is my baby. But the YouTube channel allows me to do things I can't do here. It allows me to drop, 15, 20-second videos about a particular topic with pictures that I don't have time to do on the podcast, or I don't, want to make the podcast 2 hours each week. Although, for what some of you said, that would be good. So I'm going to keep directing you to videos through the podcast, but I assure you it's just, hey, you can get more information about what we're talking about here. And if you're listening to this, you probably like the way I explain stuff, so go have a look. So I was talking about it on my Tyranitar video, on my YouTube channel. As soon as these kind of spread decks, we've got an awful lot of anti-spread, spread being you put damage on all your opponent's Pokemon. We've got an awful lot of options around that nowadays. So as much as I love that attack from Gengar, and I love that it can be done for just 1 single energy, the reality is here, if it ever becomes... it's going to be... I suppose this is what I'm saying is, it's good as a rogue deck. But it could only ever be a rogue deck. Because as soon as it starts becoming a meta deck and people start playing it, it's very easily countered. Now you can do what you did with Tyranitar, what I suggested doing with Tyranitar. Play it with Bats so that you can go Crobat, you've got 3 damage counters on, boom, KO. But that's about the only way to play it. Even a Golbat's only going to do 2 damage here. So, Burning Energy. We've had, this shouldn't surprise you now, most types have had their own special energy. Fire hasn't yet, now it's got Burning Energy. It's really interesting. It's basically Blacksmith. In a way. Yeah, no, it's not, but I suppose that's kind of analogous. Most of these have been like Pokemon Tool cards. Now, we haven't had a Pokemon Tool that does this, but it'd be kind of cool if we did. Burning Energy, essentially... it's a special fire energy that can only be attached to a fire Pokemon and will be discarded if it is attached to any other Pokemon. If an attack would force you to discard the energy, you don't discard the energy. That's in theory, and there's a huge problem with this, which I'm going to get to in a second. That's awesome! Think back to the Blue Flare Reshiram. Now, this is only going to be expanded, not in Standard. Blue Flare, 120 damage, no downside. Camerupt, 50 damage times the number of fire energy that you discard attached to your other Pokemon. Well, this is the fire energy when it's attached, so you can say, I'm going to attach these 4 burning energy, 200 damage, and then burning energy says, don't worry, mate, I'm fine here, I ain't going to get discarded. So Camerupt just does 200 damage every turn. That's awesome! You can use things like Blacksmith to be attaching to Camerupt kind of as you go, as you get started. But then you can just immediately go into, actually, don't worry, mate, because now I've got all the burning energy on the bench, so I never need to bother about discarding and re-blacksmithing. I like burning energy. I really like burning energy. Hot on the heels of burning energy, we need a new EX. Let's have Houndoom. It is a fire Pokemon. It is an EX. It's got 170 HP. For 1 fire energy, you can discard the top 2 cards from your opponent's deck. It's the same attack as Bunnelby, and Bunnelby doesn't give up 2 prizes, and Bunnelby does it for colourless, and Bunnelby's got the good second attack, which recovers cards. So yeah, you suck. However, 2 fire energy, 50 damage, and you attach a fire energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Remember, unlike when I was talking about Virizion and Herbal Energy, and I got it spectacularly wrong, Burning Energy only counts as a Fire Energy when attached, so you can only use this to attach a basic Fire Energy. 2 energy. I mean, remember you remember Fire Pokemon got a lot of support in Flash Fire, which is still legal. So you can use Blacksmith to attach 2 energy onto one of your bench Pokemon and kind of go, which is really quite important here. So you can just Blacksmith on, do 50 damage, and then attach another Fire Energy to your bench. And remember, you've got both Fiery Torch at the trainer and Scorched Earth, which allow you to discard an energy and draw 2 cards. So yeah, we've got an awful lot of support here. There's an awful lot of ways to get the energy into the discard pile, and then you can use Blacksmith to put it on Houndoom, and then you can use Houndoom to put it on other people as well. So, I mean, there's certainly a bit of scope here to make some ridiculous speed fire deck where you're just constantly using Scorched Earth and Fiery Torch to bin all your energies, and then Blacksmith to get them on Houndoom, and then Houndoom to get them on something like a Camerupt and go. I don't know. It's an idea I like, let's put it that way. And hey, good news, we've got a Mega Houndoom. When one of your Pokemon becomes a Mega Evolution, your turn ends. We know this. It's got 210 HP. That is low, but in line with stuff like Mega Manectrix, that's not a big deal. It gives up 2 prizes. It's got 2 attack. It's got 1 attack. It's all fairly standard. I like the attack, though. 2 Fire Energy. 80 damage. If you discard them all, it does 80 more damage. Put a Muscle Band on there. Spoiler alert, it's going to have a Spirit Link because it's coming in a set. So maybe that's going to be difficult to do more than 160. But 160 for 2 energy is damn good. Remember, you can Blacksmith them on, so you can go, oh no, there's no energy on Mega Houndoom. Blacksmith, 160. Remember that if you put Burning Energy on Mega Houndoom, you can just do 160 every turn. Oh, I never told you about the big downside of Burning Energy. How terribly rude of me. It's a special energy. Enhanced Hammer, or under Trainer Lock, Xerosic. This is bad, ladies and gentlemen, because Xerosic is a complete and utter pain in the neck, because you can use it under Trainer Lock, and you can use something like Bunnelby to get the special energies back, but it's a real pain. Now, I've said all the way along, the only one of these special energies that has ever really seen play, other than, Mystery Energy's seen a bit of play in Trainer Lock decks like Trevenant, because Enhanced Hammer's banned, well, not banned, but turned off, but even then Xerosic's a pain. The only one that's ever really seen play is Strong Energy, because doing the extra 20 damage is such a good effect that people have played it anyway. So, is this good enough to be played? I don't know. Do we have any good enough fire Pokemon? We got Houndoom, Mega Houndoom, we've got Camerupt. We're starting to get some good fire Pokemon. So, I don't know. We shall see. Another fire Pokemon, which is incredibly interesting, is Typhlosion. It's a Stage 2, first Typhlosion we've seen in a little while. 150 HP, which is very good for a Stage 2. The humorously named Massive Eruption. If you don't know why it's funny, don't worry, you're young. You'll get there one day. 1 Fire Energy. Discard the top 5 cards of your deck. 80 damage times the number of energies you've discarded. Oh, how I wish we had cards like Pokedex back in the format, and what was it called? Research Record, I think it was, released way back in Triumphant. These would be fun little cards. Was it even Triumphant it came out in? I'll look that up while I'm going. But if you could, I don't believe, and please somebody tweet me at the Wassy and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think we've got any cards at them. It's Call of Legends. I apologise. It wasn't in Triumphant. The mistake was there was a mini set all based around the Lost Zone, which was released in Japan, and we got some of those cards in Triumphant and some of them in Call of Legends, which is how I get confused. But yeah, Research Record. And, we've had cards in the past that have allowed you to, look at the top, rearrange the top cards of your deck. Now that I know there are attacks that do it, but they ain't all that good. But, oh my goodness, if we had trainers that let you do that nowadays. And what you could do is just play Typhlosion and a boatload of energy. Because you could even play it with stuff, you could play it with things like Scorched Earth and Fiery Torch, so you just constantly have energy to discard and play it that way. I don't think Typhlosion is going to be good, but I love that it's an option. But anyway, we've also got Flare Destroy. 130 damage, discard an energy card attached to this Pokemon, and discard an energy card attached to your opponent's active Pokemon for 2 fire and a colourless. And with things like Blacksmith, the energy won't take too long to get on there. Remember, burning energy means that you can... Now, the way burning... And again, we don't have an English translation. The way it is at the moment is, if it would be discarded, it's not. So what you can say is, I'm going to discard the burning energy... Then the burning energy would go to be discarded, and then the effect would go, oh no, you're fine. So I believe, and we will need a ruling on this when it is revealed, but I believe, or released, if you've got an option to discard something, you can choose to discard burning energy and then go, oh wait, ha. So yeah, kind of interesting. I don't think Typhlosion is going to be great, but there is a little bit of scope there. We have a Magnezone. Now the attack is kind of garbage. 2 lightning, colourless, 100 damage, discard a lightning energy. It's not good. Magnezone, it's Blastoise or Emboar for lightning Pokemon. You can just attach as many lightning energy as you want, however you want. That's awesome! And it's to, and again, this is a Japanese card, but it would be easy to tell if this was mistranslated. It's to any Pokemon, not to a lightning Pokemon. Remember, there was a Feraligatr back in Heart Gold Soul Silver, which had, like, Blastoise's ability, the recent Blastoise, except it was only to water Pokemon, which was a pain in the neck. Actually, I played that at my very first Nationals with Lantern Prime, which allowed you to... It was an electric Pokemon that you could turn into water to use with Feraligatr, and I just lost to Jumpluff all day. I went 4-3, with all 3 of my losses being to Jumpluff, because Jumpluff was just a deck I could not compete with which I could not compete, I should say. Is this going to see any play? I don't know. We got stuff like Ampharos EX and Mega Ampharos, which are pretty good. I mean, certainly we got some cards that we'll see play. It's interesting because in Standard, remember, we've lost Emboar and we've lost Blastoise. So this will be the only option for the kind of raining energy down Pokemon that we've got. So in that respect, it's very, very interesting because it's the only one we're going to have. In Expanded, you've got Blastoise and it uses with Archie, so, I mean, this is nowhere near as good. But in Standard, it's the only way we've really got to rain energy down like that. And remember, we've got cards like Lugia or Evil Town, where you put a whole bunch of energy on them and they become amazing. I don't think this is going to be amazing, but I think there's options. I mean, Emboar's always saw a bit of play. I remember Pikachu EX. It's only got 110 HP and he gives up 2 prizes, so be careful. But Pikachu EX did more damage depending on how much energy you had and discarded. So, very interesting. I don't think it's going to be game-breaking straight away, but I think there are options, shall we say. We also have a Raikou which has been revealed. Now, it's got an interesting ability, Shining Body. If there are any lightning energy attached to it, any damage done to this Pokemon is reduced by 20. We've seen this ability over and over again. Bouffalont had it, and Donphan Prime had it. Well, there was a Samurott that had it. Except all of them just reduced 20 damage. Raikou's just it just seems a bit mean. He only has it if he's got lightning energy attached. Just seems mean. Remember, it's damage done to the Pokemon, so it will work if it's on the bench as well. The attack, 50 damage for free energy, 20 more for each lightning energy attached to this Pokemon. It is Keldeo EX in terms of attack. So you can basically play Blastoise Keldeo, except you're playing Magnezone Raikou. We don't have Tropical Beach anymore, ladies and gentlemen. And remember, no one played Blastoise after Tropical Beach left until Archie's Ace in the Hole came out. So, something to bear in mind. Now, the last cards I have left are by far the most exciting in the set. And this makes me so happy that a whole bunch of people tweeted at me and messaged me and mentioned me in Facebook comments on Facebook, shockingly, when these cards were revealed, because they knew how excited I'd be. This just makes me happy. Essentially, well, it was first revealed we're getting a Swinub. And Swinub evolves into Piloswine. And Piloswine evolves into Mamoswine. And I love me some Mamoswine. Now, again, if you go back to my video on Plasma Storm, I did some rough calculations, and I can't remember. I predicted it was either this set or the next one. I can't remember. I'll have to go back and check. But I predicted that either this set or the next one we were going to get a new Mamoswine because I followed the pattern. The depressing thing is we're about 3 years away from a Mamoswine now after this one, so it better be good. And we're getting a Mamoswine, and for the first time since Stormfront, and the second time ever, looks like we're getting a fighting Mamoswine. Now the Swinub's kind of garbage, but it's fighting type, and that means we're getting a fighting one. Now annoyingly, this means it's going to be weak to grass, whereas a water one would traditionally have been weak to metal, and grass is going to be big at the moment and metal isn't. However, fighting, you can use Archie's hidden ball trick to just stick Mamoswine out as a basic. If Mamoswine has got a good attack, ladies and gentlemen, it will be playable. You can get around the fact that it's a stage 1 because we know we've got the Archie's hidden ball trick engine. And you can use Fighting Stadium. And you can use Scorched Earth. And you can use Strong Energy. Please. I don't ask Pokemon for much, but I'm begging them to make this Mamoswine playable. A nice single energy attack, a useful ability, please. I've had success with Donphan. I have, got points from regionals with Donphan. I've cut nationals with Donphan. I've never been able to play Mamoswine competitively, though I have tried. Please give me a good... Now, interestingly, we have got quite a fun little Piloswine. By the way, the Mamoswine hasn't been revealed yet. It should be revealed in time for next week, so maybe next week we'll have an in-depth episode all about what we can do with a new Mamoswine. Or just like 45 minutes of me crying, which will be your hint that the Mamoswine isn't very good. Now, the Piloswine's got one good attack. It's got 100 HP, which isn't to be sniffed at. For a fighting double colourless, which is a little bit expensive, but it 2 energy attachments... Bit of a pain, we can work around it. 30 damage plus 10 more damage for each colourless energy in the retreat cost of your Swinub, Piloswine, and Mamoswine. They want me to make a Mamoswine swarm deck, and you know what, ladies and gentlemen? I'm tempted. Now, Piloswine itself has a retreat cost of 2, which is not terribly impressive. It would only be adding 20 damage. So if you've got, 4 Piloswine in play, and remember, it says each winner, Piloswine and Mamoswine in play, it's only yours, not your opponent's. So it's doing a base of 50 because, Piloswine's got a retreat cost of 2. The question is, what does Mamoswine have? Now, if we look through them, the Plasma Storm Mamoswine had a retreat cost of 4. The Triumphant Mamoswine had a retreat cost of 4. The Stormfront Mamoswine had a retreat cost of 5. That was the only fighting Mamoswine, remember? And the very first one in Legends Awakened had a retreat cost of 4. I am hoping it's got a retreat cost of 5. Imagine if Mamoswine's got a retreat cost of 5. Now, this would be very, very awkward, but you could, using Maxie's hidden ball trick, in theory, have 4 Piloswine and 4 Mamoswine out. Now, that's never actually going to happen, because you've got to use it as your supporter for the turn, and it's got to be the only card in your hand when you play it. It's a little bit awkward, and actually the fact that we're losing Jirachi in Standard is going to hit the viability of a fighting style. Essentially, you're using the same engine that Blastoise used to win Worlds, but with Maxie's hidden ball trick. And there's no Jirachi to help you search out that supporter, and there's no computer search either, so it is more awkward. But let's just say, for argument's sake, you got 2 Mamoswine out with your 1 Piloswine, and remember you've got Wally to evolve Swinub into Piloswine turn 1, that's going to be doing, well, either 130 or 150 a turn. That's pretty damn good. That's very good, in fact. If Mamoswine's got a retreat cost of 5, that's an extra 50 damage plus a 50 for usual. If it's got 4, then that's 80 plus a 50. For free energy, 150 on what could essentially be a basic is pretty good. Now, the problem is, you're not going to swarm Mamoswines with Archie's hidden ball trick. Either way, I've probably spent way too long talking about what is a stage 1 that no one's going to play. I like Piloswine's attack, and I kind of like the idea. Well, I love the idea we're getting a Mamoswine. I am going to be incredibly interested. The other thing is we often see parallels between your Pokemon. So, we'll see all the Gengars placing damage, or you'll see the Crobat and Golbat both having similar abilities. And even the Stormfront Mamoswine did 60 damage plus 10 for each Swinub on your bench, 20 for each Piloswine on your bench, and 40 for each Mamoswine on your bench. It took 4 energy. Believe me when I say I tried to get that deck working. It never worked. Even so, I think there is a huge possibility that it's going to essentially be one of those, the more Mamoswines you've got out, the better. And we can expect it to have 150 HP. Have I spent too long sitting here trying to predict what the Mamoswine is going to look like? I think I maybe have. So, let me finish off with just a little bit more information for you lovely people. There's been some French images from the Breakthrough, which remember is going to be our next set. We can see that the booster packs are going to feature Zoroark Break, Mega Houndoom, and both the Mega Mewtwo's. The theme decks are going to have Raichu and Noivern, which shouldn't be terribly, unpredictable, because they're going to be 2 of the Break Pokemon. And the blister packs, we're getting the promo Celebi, the one I mentioned, which has got Fate to Stop, which we didn't know when it was going to be released, and we're getting the Psychic Sableye, which we haven't had before. So the Celebi is coming. It's coming in that blister pack. The Sableye also has Fate to Stop, and it's the one where you flip 3 coins for 1 Psychic Energy and attach it to your basic Pokemon for each heads. So 3 coins each head, you attach Psychic to your bench. That's kind of cool. We're also getting a whole bunch of new products. We are getting Elite Deck Shield tins. These are the metal tins they've been releasing that have got the little space for the dice at the top. And 2 booster packs for $13. We're getting Mega Mewtwo figurine collections, which gives you a figurine of either Mega Mewtwo X or Y, a never-before-seen foil card featuring Mewtwo. We could well have seen it in Japan. 4 booster packs and a code card. We're getting Mega Mewtwo X and Y 3-pack pin blisters. These are these are exactly like the 3-pack blisters, except instead of a promo, you get a pin. But I know some people have been collecting the pins. Remember, we are getting tins with Rayquaza, and with Latios, and with Hooper. Bad news, ladies and gentlemen, it's Dragon Rayquaza, not the good colourless Rayquaza. So, gutted. We are getting a collector's chest tin, which is going to be kind of like the Hoenn chest tin that we got. You're going to get 5 booster packs, 3 holo cards featuring Hooper, Pikachu and Chespin, coins, stickers, mini album, notepad, pencils, and a code card, and it's going to come in a sturdy metal case. So, might be interested in that. Mega Blaziken EX and Mega Swampert EX boxes coming out on November the 4th, with holos of Blaziken EX and Mega Blaziken, or Swampert and Mega Swampert, and a coin and a playmat, as well as 8 boosters. Essentially, think the Mega Metagross, but with Blaziken and Swampert. Bad news, that means Mega Blaziken and Mega Swampert are not getting Spirit Links. So like Absol, Diancie, and Metagross before them, they're going to be basically unplayable. Now, the other everything else is fairly standard. We're getting Elite Trainer boxes for Breakthrough. Of course we are. We've had Elite Trainer boxes for every set since X and Y. You can expect them to carry on for a while. Legendary Collection box I told you about previously. We have seen an image of the Mewtwo vs Darkrai Battle Arena deck, or whatever it's called. And the interesting thing about this was whether it was going to have a reprint of Mewtwo and Darkrai with the Next Destinies or Dark Explorers set lists, set symbols, in which case they would be legal in expanded only, not in standard, or whether we were going to get them with, new and shiny promo set symbols. Now, remember that some of these product images we get are placeholders. But as it stands at the moment, they've got the old logo, so Mewtwo and Darkrai will not be coming back into Standard. I cannot promise that is going to stay. And the very last piece of news before I leave you lovely people to whatever you do on a Wednesday after listening to PTCG Radio, or heaven forbid a day later than Wednesday. And we've had some information. Pokemon have released some information about X and Y Breakthrough. 160 cards in the set. People have moaned it's too many and it's hard to collect. Nothing we can do about that. 6 new Break Pokemon. And 8 Pokemon EX, including 4 Mega Evolution, which is not very many for a 160 card set. That's 4 EXs, 4 Mega EXs. Now, PokeBeach have been very good with this. We can essentially say what the Break Pokemon are. Zoroark, Chestnut, Raichu, Noivern, Luxray, and Golduck. Now, we know Raichu and Noivern are coming because we're getting the theme decks. Although, annoyingly, it looks like the break cards won't come in the theme decks. You'll have to get the break cards separately. Okay, fair enough. But now we get to the issue with the EXs. Now, in the Japanese set, remember that our sets are all based on Japanese sets, you've got Glalie and Mega Glalie, Houndoom and Mega Houndoom, 2 Mewtwo and 2 Mega Mewtwo. Okay. But there's also decks, because remember in Japan, well, I don't know if you do actually know this, but they have their main sets like us, but they have a whole lot more, as I keep telling you about on the pod, they have a whole lot more, hey, buy this random deck and this random set and all that, and they tend to get either given to us as promos or amalgamated into our sets. We've also yet to see Palkia EX, Morile EX, Mega Morile EX, Aerodactyl EX, or Mega Aerodactyl EX. Now, the most and this is not confirmed, I am guessing, but given that we've got 8 EXs including Mega EXs, we can take Palkia off the table because it doesn't have a Mega. But generally, we tend to follow the Japanese sets where we're doing our sets, and other ones come as promos. So like Blaziken and Sceptile were promos, they're coming out in boxes. Or Swampert, I forget which one. I told you like 2 seconds ago, just rewind like 2 minutes. So I would imagine that Morile, Mega Morile, Aerodactyl, Mega Aerodactyl are more likely to come as promos in their own boxes or whatever. So it looks like all we're getting in our next set is Glalie, Houndoom, and the 2 Mewtwo's with the associated Megas. That is not guaranteed, but we don't know. So, who knows? It's very, very interesting to, try and look at this, but it seems like we're not getting those EXs. So, yeah, we don't know where they are coming from. Obviously, as stuff gets announced and we get more information, I will share it with you. But of course, you will always have to wait till Wednesday because the podcast comes out on a Wednesday. Unless it's really big news, in which case I will do a video. Probably should have done a Shiftry video, to be honest. That would have made more sense, like I did with Lissandra's trump card. Might do one of them, probably won't. But you will be getting a deck breakdown of Jacob Van Wagner's World's Winning deck, hopefully later on today, if not tomorrow, so look out for that. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jacob. I've now set up to do interviews again, so I'll be doing more in the near future. Make sure you follow me on Twitter @TheWassy and tweet me if you got anything you want to tell us. Make sure you email me at PTCGRadio if you agree, disagree with anything, or just want to kind of say hello. Maybe you want to send me some of your predictions about Mamoswine, because I don't know if I spent quite enough time on this week's podcast predicting Mamoswine. After all, I did try and predict its weakness, HP, retreat cost, and attack, and typing, which is maybe a little bit excessive. By the way, if I had to guess, I'm going 5 retreat cost because the only other fighting one had 5. Anyway, as always, you know how to get in touch. Make sure you check me out on YouTube, youtube.com/PTCG Radio, and check out my video game channel, Wassy Plays. It is a featured channel on PTCG Radio, or you can just Google it. It's like this, but for video games, and I have a sneaking suspicion, ladies and gentlemen, that if you try it, you just might like it. Thank you very much for listening. We're going to talk Expanded next week, so until then, thank you very much for listening. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.